If it's a desert, where there's a desert, there's no water. Where there's no water, there's no food. Where there's no food, there's no people. Where there's no people, there's no towns. Where there's no towns, there's no cities. Where there's no cities, there's no civilization. Where there's no civilization, there is no history. How long did it take me to say that? All I had to do is say that one time from the ladder. Anytime they came up to discuss about Mecca, I said, hold on a minute, there's no water. No water, no food, no people, no towns, no cities, no history. You've got to have water. In order for anybody to exist, you've got to have water. Am I correct? Absolutely. And if there's no water, just like Mars, there's no point in ever going there. Now, the comeback is, Mr. Smith, you don't know what you're talking about. The Zam Zam well is there. How many people know what I'm talking about? Emil, you know what I'm talking about. What's the Zam Zam well? Tell the people what the Zam Zam well is. Oh, you call it a myth?
Yes.
Oh, it's not a myth to them. It's a myth to you, though, right? Why is it a myth to you? So, let's go to the Zam Zam well. Did you hear what Emil said? It is a well, which is true, and there's a myth that it has always existed, right? It gets even better than that. Did you get that? It's an inexhaustible well. It has always existed. It never runs out of water, okay? That's what he knows. Now, this is modern day. That was just 3 years ago. He's a convert to Islam. He used to be a Christian. Convert to Islam, well-educated, and he's making that claim. It is inexhaustible. Doesn't matter how much water you take from it, it always is resupplied by God himself. All right? Are you picking that up? This is a Western-educated man saying this. So it's not just anybody. That's why I put him up there, because everybody knows David Chappelle if you're in America. He's one of the best comics out there. He's brilliant. Great guy. One of the best I know. And yet, as a convert to Islam, he's even tied into this. Isn't that fascinating? So let's go and see what they do say, what the Muslims claim about this well. In the comment section, when I put this up there and I talked about it, Muslims commented, they said that it was very clear that the Zam Zam well refuted any notion that Mecca had no water. This was the only comeback. They said, Mr. Smith, you don't know what you're talking about. The Zam Zam well has always been there, and it's inexhaustible. It supplies water for all Muslims today. Others said that it came from the time of Adam and Eve. Some said it came from the time of Abraham. According to the current narrative, Hagar, not Sarah, his wife, after searching for water, found it and said, stop, stop. So she is in Mecca with Abraham. Abraham rebuilds the Kaaba, according to Islamic tradition. This is not me saying that. This is what Muslims tell me. And when Abraham threw Hagar out of Mecca, she was thrown out into the desert, right? She ran out of water. You have to have water. That's in order to survive. So she left Ishmael where he was, and she went running to one mountain called Safa to look for water, couldn't find it. Ran to another mountain called Marwa, couldn't find any water. So she ran back and forth 7 times between these 2 mountains. When finally, after 7 times not finding any water, she comes back to where Ishmael is sitting, and there's this water burbling out of the ground. And it was so much, she said, Zam Zam, Zam Zam, which means stop, stop. That's what he said in the film. Stop, stop. That's enough, not too much water. And that's where the Zam Zam well is, where Hagar is. So, obviously, that's right where the Kaaba is. Furthermore, it's the world's cleanest and purest water, they said. It can accommodate every pilgrim who comes to Mecca and the rest of the Muslim world who would like to drink it. Thus, it is bottled and used by millions around the world. I wanted to make sure that these guys who were commenting were really right, so I wanted to go and see what the official line was from Saudi Arabia itself, from Mecca itself. So I went to the Nada Hamid, who writes for Mecca. He is the official biographer for that whole part of the world, and this is what he says in his Arab News in 2020. He said, it sprang up 5,000 years ago when Hagar went looking for water for Ishmael. She ran between Safan and Marwa mountains 7 times before finding Zam Zam, which means stop flowing, or stop, stop. Water from the well has no impurities, with minerals and heavy a taste. Pilgrims buy it, and it is shipped all over the world for its healing properties. It costs $187 million to modernize the well to accommodate the pilgrims. Its source is rainfall going to the Wadi Ibrahim and then to the underground aquifers. 350 million liters of water is pumped from Zam Zam during Ramadan. 11 million liters a day. 11 million liters a day. During the Hajj, 314 million liters of water is pumped from Zam Zam. That's 52 million liters a day. It never runs out and will remain eternally running. Allah himself will supply it for eternity. Because of Allah, the water is always there. All right? Are you getting that? That's what the official line is. So what do we know about the well? Well, not very much. There's a picture of it from the 1800s. What does it look like, Hugh? Oh, about 30 feet wide, right? 30 feet wide. How deep? Oh, it's about 50 meters deep. There's the water at the very bottom. Can you just barely see it? Just a little bit of a pond. All right? In 1953, they put that structure over it, and they would draw out the water by a bucket, one bucket at a time. Well, there were not 2 million people needing it every day, so at that time, it was just, they could easily accommodate it, I guess. In 1953, a building was constructed over the wall. In 1963, they finally put it underground. They constructed, began to put the well underground, so that today, when you go there, all you see is that circle. But there's the Kaaba, there's the well. How many feet, how many meters? 30 meters, right, from the well. I'm showing you that purposely because that's very important. And the old structure is in a museum off to the side, and there you can see the old structure for the well. Now, here's my question. Here's a niggling problem. In 1963, when they moved the well underground, they dug it deeper to 31 meters. Now it's 31 meters today. Yet it is now situated only 21 meters from the Kaaba. Doesn't the well commemorate Hagar searching and then finding water in the desert for Ishmael in 1900 BC? Hold on a minute. So there's the Kaaba. Mecca, the city, is all around it. Abraham lives in Mecca. He's having a problem with Hagar. He throws her out of Mecca, right? Out into the desert. She's out in the desert looking for water, right? Why is she looking for water if it's only 30 meters from the Kaaba? She could just go on to the next door and just knock on the door and say, "Can I have some water, please?" Do you see a problem here, folks? Even the story makes no sense. So obviously, this is not a story that's historical. This is a story to commemorate and nothing more than a facsimile of something that is historical. Am I correct? These are nothing more than facsimiles. You'll see that later on when we get to the Hajj. If Abraham lived next to the Kaaba, then why was Hagar only 21 meters away if she had been cast in the desert? She should be miles away. That's why she couldn't find water. There was no water anywhere near. So, obviously, this is not the real Kaaba. I'm sorry, this is not the real Zam Zam. So, does the well supply all the water needs for Mecca? Well, let's ask that question. Mecca has 2 million people who live there today. That doubles whenever the Hajj comes to 4 million during the Hajj. Mecca needs 1,400 liters a second for its own population. That's equivalent to 51 Olympic-sized pools every day. That's how much water is needed just to supply the people that live there. 51 Olympic-sized pools every day. Yet the Zam Zam well only supplies 19 liters a second. And that's only after it rains. So where do they get all the water for the 2 million Meccans, plus the 2 million pilgrims, plus the millions of Muslims who buy and drink it around the world? You can go to any shop, even here in Poland, any Muslim shop, and you can find Zam Zam well on every shelf. You go to any shop, I encourage you to go home and go into your first Muslim shop, and you'll see Zam Zam well there. And take it, buy it, and taste it. It's always sweet. It's a sweetened water. It's a nectar, because it is holy water that comes from this well, the Zam Zam well. Over 1 billion people drink it every year. All from this little well that's only 30 feet across. So how is it that Allah supplies this water for 2 billion people when you start to add it all up? Where does the Zam Zam water come from? Folks, you just need to Google it. That's all I had to do. Everything I'm going to show you comes right off of Google. The Saudi Arabian government tells us where it comes from. You want to know where it comes from? Here we go. In the 1950s, the well wasn't very deep and there was very little water, as its entrance was only 30 feet across. So today, they had to cap it and they had to dig it deeper, and then they put a cap over it. There you can see, they give you pictures. They're not trying to hide this at all. I didn't have to scour or go undercover to find these pictures. That's the picture of the top of the well. But notice there's all kinds of contraptions on top of it, right? Do you see pipes coming in and pipes going out? They even show you what's inside the well. Take a look. There's pipes inside the well, going in and coming out again. Folks, they're not hiding this. It's right there for everybody to see. It seems these pipes bring the water to the well, from where it is then pumped back out to the various locations in the Masjid al-Haram and onto the bottling plants outside of Mecca. But from where does this water originate? Obviously, it's not from the well itself. It basically just wanted to go in and out so they can say it comes from the Zam Zam well. All right? You see what's going on? They're pumping millions of water into and out, in and out, in and out. That's why they had to cement it. That's why they had to put cap over it. That's why they have the pipes going into it and pipes coming out of it, so it could be purified. All right? So did it come from Allah? Is Allah doing that? No, that's what's doing it. These are desalination plants. There are 27 of these huge desalination plants on the Red Sea. Take a look at them. Everywhere you see a blue dot, that is a desalination plant. Note how most of them are on the Red Sea. Most of them, many of them serving Mecca. What's more, the world's largest water storage unit is just outside of Mecca. They're still building them. These are not for oil, folks. That is for water. That is for Zam Zam water. The world's largest holding tanks. And who built them? All of these desalination plants are built by Acciona of Canada and Spain, Bechtel Corporation, Virginia, USA, and Black & Veatch out of Kansas City, United States. Thus, the Zam Zam water is American, Spanish, and Canadian made and has nothing to do with Mecca Zam Zam well. The bottling plants were water going worldwide, and the Saudi Arabian governments are laughing all the way to the bank. It has nothing to do with Allah. It has everything to do with America and Spain. Thank you. Isn't that great? Now, I put this up on the YouTube, and boy, did I get it in the neck. They're not going to let me into Saudi Arabia anymore, because you can see they don't want the world to know. But folks, they Google this. I didn't have to go far to find it. Let's continue on. Problem number one. Where did the water for Mecca come from after the 8th century, after it was finally established? There had to have been water there. If there's no water there, they had to go get it. And folks, you can Google this as well. Just Google it and find out. You need to go, and what they do, and they say that Queen Zubeida's aqueduct is where it came from. Queen Zubeida from Iraq, between 762 and 831. She was the wife of Al-Harun al-Rashid from 799, known for her serious and dedicated intelligence. She came to Mecca and realized that there was no water there. They needed water. Obviously, they didn't have this view that Allah supplied water for them. So she therefore created and built this aqueduct. It's still there today. You can still see it. There's the ruins of it right there. Between 791 and 801, so the late 8th century and the early 9th century. The Numan Qanat went from the wadi called Numan to the Al-Azia neighborhood. It was 38 kilometers or 23 miles long, supplying 600 to 800 cubic meters of water a day. There were many renovations in 1952 by Jafar. I'm not going to give the names because Emil is there screwing his face up the way I pronounce it in my Arabic. I'm sorry, Emil. In 1236, you have Emir Shuban, who renovated again. And that was also renovated in the 1300s, also the 1400s, the 1500s, also the 1500s, continued on right up into the 1800s. And then, of course, in 1926, King Abdulaziz commissioned desalination plants. They didn't need the aqueduct anymore because they started desalinizing it in 1926. So here's the problem number two. There's an article online which showed the graph of percentage of desalinated water that was consumed by each day in Saudi Arabia in 2020. So it's just 4 years old. And it looked like the majority of water was from the groundwater, not desalination. And I said, that's curious. What is that 98% doing up there? Yet the green line's not only, it looks like only about 5%. Well, that's because whoever did the magazine that put this up completely made an error. What they should have done is this. This is what they should have done. They shouldn't have had those green lines. Whoever put it together didn't know what he was talking about. Because what it looks like 98% of all of the water that goes to Mecca comes from the desalination plant. For Medina, it's 95%. Almost all the water comes from the Red Sea. None of it comes from the Zam Zam well, or 5% of it, if it all comes from the Zam Zam well in other sources. So, where is this water stored? Well, again, it's all right up there on Google. And all I had to do was Google it. Here is the modern Google map of Mecca today. The Masjid al-Haram, there you see I've just circled it. Al-Safan and Marwa are there as well. The Mina tent city is where 2 million people come. They all need to be watered. And then the 3 Jamarats, where they just throw the stones for the pilgrim, is there. There's Mount Arafat way down to the southeast. With 4 million people during the Hajj, where is the water stored to accommodate all of them? Right up at the top, right on the buildings. There they are, the Muna Bulk Reservoir with 7 large storage tanks. They store 1 million cubic feet of water. Not from the Zam Zam well, it's all up in the storage tanks. Where did the Muna storage tanks water come from? From Jeddah, from 11 Brimam Reservoir, designed and built by the Atkins team from Vinci Construction, United Kingdom. Not from Arabia, not from God, from the UK, thanks to the British. So where did the water of Mecca come from subsequent to the 8th century? Not from Allah, but from the West. All right, let's get then and let's start about the Hajj. Because if Mecca did not exist, then what do you do with the Hajj? You have to have Mecca for the Hajj. The Hajj is the pilgrimage that every Muslim must do. At some point in their life, they must go to Mecca, and there are 5 stages of the Hajj. I'm not going to go through all the stages, but the stage that they start with is this one here. There you can see the Kaaba. Notice this thing here pointed where? Well, it's pointed towards Jerusalem. But what's fascinating is what they do is they circumambulate this direction 7 times. Why would you need to circumambulate 7 times? Where does the number 7 come from? Hold on to that. Ask a Muslim that. They won't know. They'll have no idea. Go ahead. Okay, but where is that happening? Yeah, but okay, sorry. Where does that happen on earth besides the Bible? Who circumambulates 7 times going clockwise? Hold on. Okay, we'll get to that. So here they go. There's the Kaaba. What does Kaaba mean? It means cube in Arabic. Emil had to go to another function. He'll be back this afternoon, so I can't use him as my Arabist. But just assume that I'm correct, okay? Cube. Interestingly, it's the same word in Syriac. It's the same word also in Hebrew. Cube. It's the Holy of Holies, the cube, the Kaaba. There in Jerusalem, in the temple. The same word, the same function, the same building. Ooh, So here you have them going around a square building 7 times counterclockwise. Why? Well, some people thought that maybe it has to do with Petra, because Petra also had a cube that they would circumambulate around. But 7 times? Why? To answer that, you need to go to Jerusalem. It's Jerusalem where they go 7 times around, and you are correct. It is the Kaaba in Jerusalem, the cube in Jerusalem that all the Jews were to because of Jericho. Joshua's to go around Jericho 7 times counterclockwise, blowing the trumpet. So this is nothing new, folks. They've just lifted it from Jerusalem. It was in Jerusalem first. Now it's in Mecca today. All right? They're just copying Jerusalem. Why? Because the pilgrims, the Jewish pilgrims always went out. Now today, you see the Dome of the Rock is sitting right there. Actually, this is an old picture, maybe 100 years old. So you can see Jerusalem is not as built up there as it is today. And you notice the dome is not gold. It is gold today. It was only made gold in 1876. Most of the outer parts of the Dome of the Rock the Dome of the Rock has been destroyed and rebuilt 11 times. The only original part are the inner ambulatories, which you can't see. That's hugely significant, as you're going to see why in just a bit. So that is where the original Kaaba was. That is where the original circumambulation was. It was all done by the Jews going counterclockwise because, as you said, Jericho. Now, what do they do next? Next thing they do, there's the Kaaba there, right? They go around the Kaaba 7 times. Then they run back and forth between Safa and Marwa, Safa and Marwa. Remember, Safa and Marwa is where Hagar is looking for water. She's going to this mountain called Safa. She's going to this mountain called Marwa. Do those look like mountains to you? No, they look like rocks to me, just 20 feet high. Children can play on that. Yet that's the Safa and Marwa that they go to. Obviously, this is not the original Safa and Marwa. Am I correct? Because if this is the original Safa and Marwa, it would be way out in the desert, like I said earlier. It's not out in the desert. It's only 21 meters away from the Kaaba. There's the Kaaba. There's Safa and Marwa. The Zam Zam well is right there. So obviously, these are nothing more than facsimiles. You know what a facsimile is? These are symbols of something that is original. It's much like if you were to go to Las Vegas today. You notice there'll be an Eiffel Tower over here. There'll be a pyramid over here. Is that the original Eiffel Tower? And is that the original pyramid? No. Those are models. Those are facsimiles to represent the original Eiffel Tower in Paris and the original pyramids in Egypt. And the same thing is going on here. These are nothing more than facsimiles. Nothing more than models. So where is the original Safa and Marwa then, that these are modeled after? They would have to be somewhere else, right? And much bigger. Dan Gibson thought it was here in Petra because there is a Safa and Marwa, but those were only named there after the fact. That's intermediate Safa and Marwa. So where is the original Safa and Marwa? Just go to Jerusalem. There's the Temple Mount. That's where the Dome of the Rock is. It is called Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah in Arabic is Marwa. It's the Marwa is the Arabic name for Mount Moriah. You go to the Kidron Valley down here, and the pilgrims would go down to the Kidron Valley, come back up to Mount Scopus. Mount Scopus in Arabic is Safa. Josephus writes about it in the 2nd century, Safa and Marwa. There is the original Safa and Marwa in Jerusalem. Surprise, surprise. There's nothing new under the sun. Everything Islam does is borrowed, proving that Hagar had nothing to do with Safa and Marwa, not up here, because Hagar was not up this far south, north. But interestingly, the Muslims assumed that that was to do with Hagar. Can you see, even that tradition is completely out of whack. But that's typical of Islam. Everything they do, they just make up as they go. And you'll see that's even happening as we speak. So there's the Marwa and Safa. It's in Jerusalem, like the circumambulation is Jerusalem, like the original Kaaba is Jerusalem. It all comes back to Jerusalem. So many of the Hajj traditions are borrowed. The Kaaba in Mecca, it comes from Jerusalem. The Safa and Marwa comes from Jerusalem. You also then, they would then go to the hill of Ararat, the meeting place, Mecca. That is what we know as Becca, the Becca Valley. When pilgrims come from to Jerusalem to do their pilgrimage, they would stop at Becca, and that's where they would do their ablutions, they would do their prayers before they entered into the temple there in Jerusalem. So there's the Ararat that commemorates that. And then curiously, this is something that's not in Jerusalem. They would go to what they call the Jamarat, which is real close to the Kaaba. And there was a pillar up until the 1980s. There is the pillar, and these are all the people who were throwing stones. They would throw 72 stones at the pillar. The problem is not everybody is a good shot, and the stones were hitting the people in the front and killing them. So many people were being killed by these stones that they had to rebuild it to look like this. So today, this is what the Jamarat looks like. 1, 2, 3. Hold on, there was one Jamarat. And up until 1980, the story that goes with that Jamarat is that is the devil. So you are stoning the devil, right? That's why you stone 70 times, 72 times, stoning the devil. Well, now there are 3 Jamarats. So how do they interpret that? How can there be 3 devils? There are 3 devils. Ask any Muslim, what are the 3 Jamarats for? And they will say, you are stoning the 3 temptations of Abraham. 3 temptations is not stoning the devil. Since 1980, the new narrative has completely changed. How many people were alive in 1980? I was. Few of us are. The gray-haired ones are. We were alive when this got changed. So even the narrative is being changed as we speak in our lifetime. If it's happening today, why are we surprised it's been happening for 1,400 years? It keeps changing depending on what they need. Folks, this is what I love about Islam. It is so easy to shut down. Because if this is proving proof after proof after proof, this is nothing more than a man-made religion. Even the narratives, even their traditions are being created as we speak. And then they go to the Zam Zam well. Now look at the Zam Zam well. Where do you think that comes from? There's the Zam Zam also in Petra. It's the same word. And there is where the original Zam Zam well is. It's the pool of Siloam that's in Jerusalem. All starts in Jerusalem. Everything that they do, the five stages all come from Jerusalem, except for the Jamarat, except for the Jamarat. 4 of them. But then we get to the worst one, and this is the one that makes no sense. As they're circumambulating 7 times around the Kaaba, all the pilgrims are going and trying to kiss the black stone. There's the black stone right there. It's surrounded by this silver encasing. You can see they're trying to push and shove. They have to have guards there to keep the crowds in bay because everybody wants to kiss that stone. Why do they want to kiss that stone? Because that's how they get forgiveness. A stone on the corner of the Kaaba where you get forgiveness. Who can forgive but God himself? Is that not idolatry? At the very seat of Islam is idolatrous. And yet Islam is always very clear that there's only one God but God. They put their finger up all the time saying one God, and yet they have a stone that now does the same work as God. Have Muslims explain that stone to you. And they cannot. And why is it that stone still there? Why doesn't the Saudi Arabian government get rid of it? Because that is idolatry, is it not? You want to know the reason why? Just do a historical study. Just look at history and follow where the stone came from. The black stone. Folks, why is it black, by the way? Have any of you asked your Muslim friends? And notice it's not one stone. In fact, if you look at it carefully, it's actually tar with 8 little pebbles that are stuck in the tar. The reason it's black is because it's made out of tar. That's not what the Muslims will tell you. The Muslims will say, because so many people have kissed it, it has received so much sin, it used to be white, it is now turned black because of all the sins. Isn't that lovely? I love it when they answer for me. I just let them walk it through and then just back them up and say, so that is straight idolatry. You're now going to an object, 8 little objects, and you're having them take away your sins. So what do we know about that stone? Well, to understand that, you need to do a historical study. The black stone does have a history. It was possibly a meteorite that discovered by the Phoenicians in 300 to 400 BC. So we have references to the black stone as far back as the 5th century BC. It was then collected by the Phoenicians. They saw it streaking across the sky. Obviously, when you look at something streaking across the sky and it lands at a place, you believe it is a gift from God. So that makes sense in that time. The Romans, however, grabbed it from the Phoenicians. They brought it back to Rome. And then the Roman Emperor Aurelius Antonius Elagabalus took the stone and moved it to Damascus in 222 AD. And he is the one that started the belief that wherever the black stone was, the presence of God went with it. So where the black stone is, there is God's presence. It was then moved to Petra in the 7th century, and then in 687, the late 7th century, Ibn Zubayr, who was the governor of Petra under Abd al-Malik, destroyed much of Petra, rebelled against Abd al-Malik, remained in Petra, and sent his women and his children down to what is now today Mecca. That's why Mecca was chosen. He sent them because that's where his area, that's where he came from. It doesn't say Mecca, it just says sent them to the south, to the Hijaz. That Mecca is in the Hijaz. But what did he send with them? He sent with them the black stone for protection. He remained in Petra. Zubair then fought against al-Hajjaj, who came from Iraq under the authority of Abd al-Malik, and he was killed there in Petra. But the black stone was now in the south. So the pilgrims no longer went to Petra because the pilgrims wanted to go to where the black stone was, because that's where God's presence was. So now they were moving, and the pilgrimage now went down south, down to where the black stone was. So the Abbasids, who were in Ctesiphon, what is today Baghdad, who hated the Arabs who were up in Damascus in Syria, the Abbasids were getting stronger and stronger. The Umayyads were getting weaker and weaker. But the Abbasids had a problem. They had political hegemony, but they did not have theological authority. They needed a theological authority. And so they made an alliance with the family of Zubair to have the black stone as their sanctuary. Now can you see why Mecca was chosen? Mecca was chosen because the Abbasids needed a sanctuary. Not in Petra, not in Jerusalem, in Mecca. Now that they have legitimacy, they grew stronger and stronger, and then finally defeated the Umayyads in 749 and then redirected all the mosques. That's why all the mosques now get redirected towards Mecca after 749. By the 9th century, no mosque was facing anywhere but Mecca. It all had to do with politics, not theology, not historicity. So, Mecca's creation. When did it actually begin? Well, probably the best thing to do is to find out when it began. Why don't we just read some inscriptions? Just read what exists. That's the great thing about rock inscriptions, is that they don't deteriorate, they don't disintegrate, and they're always there. You can still read them today, except this one. This is the one that sets it straight. This is an important rock inscription. It's very close to Taif. Remember I showed you Taif that's up on the plateau that's southeast of Mecca? It's one of the oases along the trade route. You start here at Aden, you go to Sana, you go to Najran, then you go to Taif. Remember I showed you Taif? And then from Taif you go to Yathrib, then Khaybar, Tabuk, and then on up to Gaza and in the north. Well, there in Taif is this rock inscription. And it's written in Nabatean Aramaic. That's interesting. You'll see why later on. And it says, this was written in the year the Masjid al-Haram was built in the 78th year. The Masjid al-Haram is what the Kaaba is today, the place, a forbidden place of bowing. It never says Kaaba, it just says Masjid al-Haram, which is what the Qur'an says too, Masjid al-Haram in chapter 2. Note the word Bunia, was built. Muslims today say no, it's saying rebuilt. And the ones who are saying that are from the Asian subcontinent. They're not Arab speakers. And Emil, if he was here, he would support me on this. You cannot get bunia, you cannot get ueda out of bunia. It's completely different consonants. So it's obviously, just read the consonant, it is bunia, not ueda. And it's only the Asians that are trying to change the word. So therefore, we can assume that this inscription, which is located 75 kilometers from Mecca on the route to Taif, right next to Taif, refers to the site of the Masjid al-Haram, which later became Mecca in the Hijaz. This would suggest that the Kaaba, and thus Mecca, were built around 697 to 698. That's the late 7th century. Because 78 years after 622 is the year that the Arabs finally got their freedom. Heraclius destroyed the Sassanians, the Persians, and gave the Arabs their freedom. That's why 622 is important for all Arabs. And isn't it interesting the Muslims have chosen that year for the beginning of their calendar? Isn't that fascinating? It has nothing to do with Muhammad. It has everything to do with freedom to be your own. And finally, the year the Arabs were finally had their own autonomy. So 78 years from 622 would make it 698. Conclusion? Therefore, it was constructed during the reign of Abdul Malik in the late 7th century, and not at the time of Adam and Eve, nor even during the time of Muhammad. Now, we can only get that from this rock inscription. Because we've gone public with that, the Saudi Arabian government has now destroyed that rock. It no longer exists. Do you see what they're doing? They're just trying to destroy everything, but we have the pictures of it. There it is right there. And we also have reference after reference, and of course, we can therefore still use it. But can you see the problem for the Saudi Arabian government? They've got to destroy whatever we put up. That's especially happening with the coins, which we're going to talk about probably after lunch, or maybe before. Now, there are Quranic problems as well. It's the wrong script from that part. So if the Quran had been written by Muhammad between 610 and 622, not written, but revealed between 610 and 622. We know that it was not written down by the time when he died. It was written down by Abdul, the Caliph Abu Bakr, Abu Bakr. Abu Bakr was the one that commissioned Zayd ibn Thabit, the secretary of Muhammad, to write the Quran down. That was in 632. So by 632, the Quran is written down. And we have it right here. This is the 632 Quran. Doesn't look like it comes from 632? Just check the Arabic in it. It's actually was just printed about 10 years ago. But this is the Uthmanic recension. You notice I'm not picking that one up. I'm not picking that one up. Why am I not picking that one up? It's also in Arabic. And it's also the Quran. Right? Exactly the same, right? Hold on. But this is the one that they say is the Uthmanic recension. So, if this is the Uthmanic recension, 632, therefore, the Arabic that's in it should come from Mecca, right? Stands to reason. Because Abu Bakr is living in Medina. He's living in the Hijaz. So is Umar, so is Uthman, so is Ali. The first four caliphs are all living in Medina. That's the headquarters of Islam. Every standard Islamic narrative refers to that. So if that is the case, this Arabic should come from the Hijaz, from Mecca, Medina. It doesn't. So what am I talking about? Well, let's put a map up again. According to the Quran, the Qurayshi Arabic, that is the Qurayshi dialect that was used by Abdul Malik, is from that area there, right? That is what the Quran tells us, from the green area, right down here. There's the Hijaz. Yet what's interesting is, take a look at the endings that are on the ends of words, like the i'rab. These are unstressed inflectional short final vowels marked with diacritics known as i'rab because they were characteristics of Bedouin dialects. But even before the diacritics are introduced, you have the tar marbuta. The addition of two superimposed dots above it after the 8th century gives the tar marbuta. But the alif maksura is just like it looks like an S, and it's the word final dotless ya. These are in the Quran all the way through the Quran today. The tar marbuta, the alif maksur, and especially the definite article, the so-and-so, the al-bayt, the house. The definite article was absolutely needed, and you see it all the way through the Quran, but those definite articles, plus the tar marbuta, plus the alif maksura, plus the i'rabs do not belong where the green is. They belong up here. That's Nabatean Aramaic. This is 600 miles further north. They've got the wrong Arabic. So obviously this Quran could not have been written in Mecca. Are you following me? Don't worry, I'm not asking you to learn Arabic. I just want you to look at, just look at this one here. Do you see that S there? That is in the Quran, but that doesn't come from Hijaz. So what Arabic was used down there? What Arabic would have been used in Mecca, Medina? That's Sabaic Arabic. Sabaic Arabic comes from what is today Yemen and Oman. The Sabaic Arabic does not have the tar marbuta, does not have the alif maksura, does not have the definite article, does not have these i'rab, inflectional short and final vowels, none of them. Yet that's what it would be if it was written and received by a man named Muhammad living in Mecca and then moving to Medina, and also then written by Abu Bakr in 632 and then rewritten a second time by Uthman in 652. They would have all been using Sabaic Arabic. So obviously this Quran could not have come from Mecca. Are you following that much? Okay? Here's the irony. Quranic Arabic, which is Nabatean Aramaic, existed 600 miles further to the north, up at where that red rectangle is. While the 7th century Arabic of Mecca in the Hijaz Sabaic would have accommodated the text of the Quran had it been used, eradicating the Qira'at problem that we're going to talk about this afternoon, that absolutely destroys the preservation of the Quran. But I'm kind of jumping the gun. You don't have any idea what I'm talking about, because I haven't talked about it yet. That's coming this afternoon. But the Qira'at problem is by far the most damaging for the Quran. And that would not have been a problem if it had been written in Sabaic Arabic. Because Sabaic Arabic did have the diacritical marks, the 5 different dots. The na, ta, tha, ba, ya. Would have had the 3 vowels, the dhamma, the kasra, and the fatha, u, a, and the e. Not the Nabatean Aramaic. No dots, no vowels. Just 6 consonantal letters. That's it. 16 consonantal letters. That's all it had. Ooh, it's so nice. Makes my job so easy. And what happened, according to the traditions, when other people from outside came in, they all spoke Arabic, but they had different dialects, right? How many? 7 different dialects. So when Abu Bakr, the caliph, in 632, commissioned the Quran to be written, to go to Al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509. What does it say there? It says that he received it and had his secretary write it in Arabic. 20 years later, in Uthman, just turn the page to hadith number 510, Uthman realized that there was a problem because it was written in the wrong Arabic, right? So what did he do? He woke up Zayd ibn Thabit after being asleep for 20 years, I'm being facetious, woke him up and had him rewrite it in the Qurayshi dialect. Qurayshi is what language? Arabic. But it's a form of Arabic, right? So this is all still Arabic. He wrote it in Arabic, and then what did Uthman do next? He burned all the other copies. How can you burn copies if they are dialectical differences? Here's where I need Emil's house. And none of you understand Arabic, right? But how do you get a dialectical difference in Arabic? You need the vowels. The dhamma, the kasra, and fatha. Were there any vowels in the 7th century? No. So this makes no sense, does it? Or for those who are watching on the camera, if you're an Arabic speaker, the question he's asking is, could this have been another language or could this have been another dialect? Absolutely not, because you can't have dialectical differences in a written text, not in the 7th century. This would be a question for the 9th century. That's why Al-Bukhari, who's writing in the 9th century, and as we now know, we're talking about the 12th century, because there's nothing about Al-Bukhari in the 9th century. In the 9th century or in the 12th century, then there is dialectical differences, because by then there was vowels. So this is an argument by Al-Bukhari thinking, that's all it was, these are dialectical differences. And Muslims today still say it, and I just say, Muslims, look at your own history. There was no dialectical difference. Spoken, yes. Orally, yes. You say potato, I say potato. You say tomato, yeah, I say tomato. It's still spelled the same way, but it's pronounced a different way. But in Arabic, it is not. You have to write the different vowels in. You put the vowels in where the changes are. Is it kutab, or is it kitab, or is it katib? You need a fatha or a dhamma or a kasra to make a difference. That did not exist in the 7th century. There were no vowels to make that distinction. So can you see then, therefore it has to be. But we're not even talking about vowels here. We're talking about the ending of the words. The alif maksura does not require any vowels. The definite article doesn't require vowels. It's just an alif lam. just an aleph lam beforehand. That doesn't require any vowel. Aleph is a long vowel. So the definite article, by definition, would have existed if Muhammad or whoever wrote the Quran or received it lived up in Nabatean Aramaic, which would be up in Jordan, 600 miles too far north. Okay? So that's why coming and going, these arguments that Muslims are making are all being made by Asians, not by Arabs. The Arabs are keeping quiet on this because the Arabs know that this makes no sense. You can't make these arguments. Not as an Arab, not if you know Arabic. The Asians don't know Arabic, but the problem is the Asians outnumber everybody 3-1. There are many more Muslims who are from Asia than there are from the Middle East. Middle Eastern Arabs, Muslims only make up 15% of all Muslims. They're a very small minority. They're not arguing this. They would rather we not argue this. They would rather we move to something else because they're squirming when they realize just how damaging this is. Proving, therefore, that the Quran could not have come from Mecca at all. And I'm not even talking about the aleph. I'm not talking about the diacritical marks. I'm not talking about the vowelization yet. I'm just talking about the script itself. The consonantal script is the wrong script. The consonants are wrong. All right, does that help? But yeah, we'll get to Zayd ibn Thabit. Hold on to that this afternoon, because that's an even more damaging question, and you'll see why. If Zayd ibn Thabit could write it down, then why is it we don't have any reference, any manuscript that he wrote? Listen, Uthman sent it to 5 different cities: Mecca, Medina, Basra, Kufa, and Damascus. Where is there one of them? And we're only talking about 1,400 years ago. Those cities have been in Muslim hands for the last 1,400 years. There's been no war, there's been no fire, there's been no flood. There's been no need to have lost all 5 of them. In fact, we can't even find one Quran from the 7th century, let alone 5. Ooh, love this. See how easy it makes my job? And it makes your job easy as well, all right? But that's for this afternoon. Hold on for this afternoon for that. So just to get that, and now let's look at the claims they do make. Because the Muslims are saying we can find, yes, there is, we can find the Mecca. And they're looking and they're saying that there are 4 major claims that they make that Mecca did exist. These are the best, these are the only 4 that are out there. Let's go and debunk each one of them, okay? Because you're going to get them. So I need to help you to know how to be able to support them or defend them against them. The Samaritan, they call it the Samaritan Asatir. From 200 BC. And this is what it says. The Samaritan Al-Satir says this: all the sons of Nabaioth reigned from the river of Egypt to the river Euphrates, and they built Mecca. Oh, looks like 200 BC, Mecca does exist. And that's what they're going to throw at you. Moses Gaster, a British rabbi and Orientalist, in 1927 wrote that the Asatir, Book of the Secrets of Moses, believed that the Asatir was archaic, reflecting an early stage in Samaritan thought and literature, which the Samaritans of his time could no longer fully interpret. He proffered a date of no later than 200 BC. Ian D. Morris, who's probably the world authority on this material and has probably done the best job, he lives in Amsterdam, scholar of an early Islam, works at the University of Amsterdam, confronts this date, suggesting that the authors lived under Muslim rule, as it includes conversations with Muslims as well as Jewish scholarship. Therefore, it had to have been written while Islam was well into its authority. In other words, if you look at the theology of Islam, it evolves as they have debates with Christians and Jews. And you can see that by looking at the tafsir, the commentaries. And he says, when you look at the Asatir, it has these theological debates. These theological debates don't even begin to appear until the 9th and 10th century. So this reference to Mecca had to have been sometime after that. 2 specialists, Zaid bin Hayam and Christoph Bonnard, propose arranged dates for the Asatir from the late 10th century to the end of the 11th century. Conclusion, the Asatir is therefore not pre-Islamic reference to Mecca, as it's simply too late. It's 400 to 500 years too late. Okay, by the 10th, 11th century, of course, Mecca was well known. By the 8th century, Mecca was well known. So, of course, they would have had the name Mecca that time. What about Diodorus in the 1st century BC? Edward Gibbon, in 1788, in his book on the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Volume 5, states that Diodorus referred to Mecca in his 1st century writing. And this is what Diodorus says. Now, interestingly, Diodorus in the 1st century BC is quoting Agatharchides in the 2nd century BC, who wrote this. This is all he wrote. A very sacred temple has been established there, which is highly revered by all the Arabs. Is there any reference to Mecca there? What do you have? Temple, Arabs, right? An Arab temple. That's all it says, right? That must be Mecca. According to Edward Gibbons, in the 1700s, that's Mecca. Ptolemy II of Philadelphia, 283 to 246 BC, sent Ariston to check out the Gulf of Aqaba for a military expedition. And it was his descriptions which Agatharchides refers to. Now, Agatharchides, just read the rest of what Agatharchides says. He says it's a bay or gulf, the Kalpos, somewhere south of the Gulf of Aqaba, that runs inland about 500 stadia. Stadia means how many stadiums, thus around 90 kilometers. If you have 500 stadiums, well, length to length to length to length, it's about 90 kilometers. The mouth is too craggy for ships to traverse, he says. So it's a temple, note, not a Kaaba, which was revered by all the Arabs. A temple revered by the Arabs. The only temple situated in the Gulf of Aqaba is known as the Temple of Wadi Ainuna. Let's take a look at a map. That's the Gulf of Aqaba there, right? Over here is the Sinai Peninsula. Over here this is Aqaba. By the way, this is where the NEOM project is being built. Have you all heard about the NEOM project by MBS, Mohammed bin Salman? No? You've not heard about it? It's going to be the largest structure in history. It's actually being built as we speak, and it's going to be finished by 230. It's starting from Aqaba right over here and going inland 110 miles to Tabuk. It'll be a line with different pods on it with high-speed rail, and it's going to have flying cars. It's going to have enough scientific material there for all the best researchers in the world to come and do their research. Yeah, you have a question?
Just to confirm, it was the line?
Yeah, it's the 100-mile line with the high-speed rail. And that's going to be finished by 230. So this is Aqaba. We're talking about the same area. There's the Gulf of Aqaba. There's Aqaba today. And so what is he talking about? Located 90 miles from Tiran. Well, there's Tiran Island here. It's at the mouth of the Gulf of Aqaba. This is the Red Sea here, the northern part of the Red Sea. There's the Tiran Island. Rated 500 stadia. It means 90 kilometers from the Tiran Island. You go 90 kilometers, and what do you get? Somewhere over there. So what is over there? The Wadi Ainuna. There it is right there. That's well known. That's the temple it's referring to. All right? So, where is the Wadi Ainuna in relation to Mecca? There's the Gulf of Aqaba. There is what we're talking about. There's Tabuk, there's Medina, there's Khaybar, there's Yathrib. The Gulf of Aqaba and all these other places have been around since the 3rd century BC. These are well known. No one disputes that. Wadi Ainuna was well known then and still is well known today. In the 3rd to 1st century BC, the only known Arabs would have lived up north around the area of the Gulf of Aqaba. But Mecca was not known at all back then, as it didn't exist. And why didn't it exist, folks? One word.
No water.
No water. Now notice just how far Wadi Ainuna is from Mecca. 962 kilometers, almost 1,000 kilometers further north. That is 10 times further than the 90 kilometers Agatharchides and Diodorus are referring to, proving that they were not referring to Mecca at all. However, what about this reference to all the Arabs? All the Arabs went there. Therefore, that had to be Mecca because all the Arabs go to Mecca, is what the Muslims are saying. No. You've got to know what Arabs meant. What do Arabs mean in the time it's written? That's the known world at that time. This is the known civilized world during the time of this writing. Arabia was in the red box. It was known as Arabia Petraea. Arabia was nothing more than what is today Israel, Lebanon, parts of Jordan, and a little bit of the Sinai Peninsula. It was a very small area because that was the only inhabitable part. And why is it the Arabs for them there? Because there was water there. As long as there's water, you're going to find the Arabs. If there's no water, notice there's nothing on the map after that. It's just white because there's no reason to go there. There's no water. Note that as late as 125 AD, there simply weren't any Arabs further south than Arabia Petraea. So when Agatharchides is writing about the Arabs, he's writing about that area where the red rectangle. He's not at all introducing or including. All the Arabs, they, as well as Agatharchides and Diodorus knew, were only those who lived in this area, northern area. And the reason why is because those are the only places where humans lived, and that's why they would have known about them. So that would wipe out Diodorus. Now we go to number 3, Pliny the Elder, Juba II. Is written about, the writing is called Dialectical Regio. For students of ancient history, Pliny the Elder is indispensable. He's well known. He died in 79 AD. His description of the Arabian Peninsula is cogent and sometimes corroborated by other ancient writers. There is no reason to think that Pliny himself ever did fieldwork in Arabia. Much like Ptolemy, he just got it from others and he wrote it in his geography. He relied on other studies, often citing the popular works of Juba II, who died in 23 AD. That's a picture of him in the brown. A Mauritanian living in Rome, who traveled and wrote about the northern Arabian Peninsula. Among the places in Juba's description of Arabia is Dabanagoris, Reggio, or the region of Dabanagoris, where he states after the Dogs River, according to Juba, there is the Taludai tribe, the Dabanagoris district, Mount Orsa, with its harbor. In 1970, the geographer Herman von Wissmann proposed that this was the territory belonging to the Quraysh, as well as Mecca and its environs. Dabanagoris would then mean literally that which belongs to the sons of the Quraysh. So that was introduced in 1970. Now here are the problems. According to Morris, who's done the work on this, Wissmann read Quraysh into Dabanagoris. How can you get Quraysh out of Dabanagoris? That's stretching it pretty far. But that is, Oris is a declension, not an integral part of the root of the word. If Dabanagoris Reggio is the region of Dabanagoris, there is no room left for the Quraysh. Dr. Patricia Corona referred to the term son of Quraysh, Banu Quraysh, is a bit faulty. Quraysh is the name of the tribe, not a patriarch within the tribe, so the patronymic son of Quraysh would have made little sense to anyone. Geographically speaking, just look and see where Pliny and Juba are referring to. That's the route that they went. They followed the Arabian coast from Charat, which is up there in what is today Iraq, down the Persian Gulf, around Oman, dropping the name Dabanagoris Reggio along the way. Folks, do you see what part of Arabia that is? It's the wrong side of Arabia, isn't it? It's the eastern side of Arabia. Conclusion, it is evident that Dabanagoris Reggio has nothing to do with the Quraysh, and even if it did, the region could not include Mecca, as it is on the wrong side of the peninsula. It's on the eastern coast of Arabia, not the western coast. So we can throw that out. Now we come to the best one. This is the one that you'll hear a lot of Muslims using, Macoraba. How many have heard this argument about Macoraba? No one. Okay, well, you will hear it. As soon as you talk about Mecca, they'll say, we have found Macoraba. And it's in Ptolemy's writings. Claudius Ptolemy in 170 AD, 2nd century, a Greek writer and geographer from Alexandria in Egypt, wrote a guide to geography between 141 and 147. In it, he gave no coordinates for a place, but he gave coordinates for a place called Macoraba as 73 by 20 by 22 degrees. Notice Ptolemy's lap on the right. Now, that's not his map. That's what others later on have introduced. So, Macoraba is there, which I've just circled, and there is Yathrib. Notice where Macoraba is. Is that where Mecca is today? No. But it sounds pretty good. Macoraba, Mecca, Macoraba, Mecca. If you knew Arabic, if Emil here, I'd ask him, what does Macoraba mean and what does Mecca mean? Well, every Arabic word has 3 consonants. So Mecca would be MKK, because there's no vowels. Macoraba would be Karib. Ma would be the people of the Karib. So it's a completely different consonant. But if you don't know Arabic, you would say that Macoraba sounds like Mecca because they start with the first same consonant. Problem is that first consonant, ma, is referring to people, not a place. So the consonants are completely wrong. Nonetheless, let's continue on. Muslims will say that Macoraba is southeast of Yathrib, yet Mecca is southwest of Yathrib, where the star is. If Macoraba is Mecca, then he's misplaced it. Well, that could well be, because maybe he didn't have a map at that time. So why do we think Macoraba is Mecca? The European historical narrative, European scholars since the time of French historian Samuel Bochard in 1651 have claimed that Macoraba was indeed Mecca. John Heinrich Zedler in 1739 included this supposed reference to Mecca by Ptolemy in his German encyclopedia. And then in 1799, Konrad Mehnert, the Prussian historian, suggested that the word Macoraba meant a temple. In 1846, the German scholar Albert Forbiger referenced Macoraba as Mecca in his encyclopedia, which canonized the idea for most Europeans ever since. So since 1846, everybody has believed Macoraba is Mecca. That's what I was taught when I was in school. In 1890, Edward Gasser suggested that the word Macoraba was a southern Arabian word for mihrab, which then meant a place of worship. Consequently, since then, most Western scholars now believe Macoraba is Mecca. Dan Gibson took this on, and he says, hold on a minute. There are a number of city locations on Ptolemy's map which are well known today. Ptolemy correctly identifies the Yemeni ports of Musa, Aden, and Kane. This provides us with 4 rivers and 3 coastal cities that we can identify today. Gibson matched the towns and the cities with the rivers which still exist today and overlaid them on a map at the right. And notice what he comes up with. Do you see a problem? If you look at those cities and put them where the rivers are, where do you place them? Well, let's show you. Boom, 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 boom. Ooh, do. They're all underwater. You can't have those cities underwater. How do you live? That's too much water, okay? And the wrong kind of water. So unfortunately, this puts some of the cities in the Arabian and the Red Sea, which would not be exactly healthy for the inhabitants. So obviously, Ptolemy, who had never been there, he just put them where he just put them near the rivers and mountains without even having been there to know whether he was correct. Gibson decided to match Ptolemy's rivers to the location of the rivers today, not the ones that he thought were, but where they actually exist today, and obtain a correct map. Now look where all the cities are that he's mentioned. Notice they're all in the south or the east or the north. Nothing in the middle. Why? Because in the north you have water. In the south you have water. In the middle, no water. No water, no food, no people, no towns, no cities, no history, no civilization. In so doing, it became apparent that Ptolemy was not aware of the vastness of the desert of the Arabian interior. He'd never been there. He didn't know there was a desert in between. He had no idea. And that's why he plotted the location in Yemen too far north. By shrinking Ptolemy's map southward to accommodate the desert, many of his locations suddenly fit. Macoraba became what is today known as Al-Mahabisha. And remember, names of cities change all the time. What is the name for Baghdad? It used to be Ctesiphon. It doesn't even have the same roots. What is the ancient name for Cairo? Anybody know? I forgot myself. It'll come to me. So you see, names get changed all the time. If you have any doubt, just come to America and see all the German and English and Irish names we have all over in Pennsylvania. Everything ending with Berg or, oops, there we go again. Let's put this guy back in place. Sorry, folks. So Macoraba was not only an interior settlement of Arabia, but it turned out to be only a small hamlet situated in the Hadramaut, which is the southern part of what is today Yemen in southern Arabia. Now, Patricia Crone says this. In her bestseller, Beck and Trade in the Rise of Islam, devoted a number of pages arguing against the supposed evidence for Macoraba. She noted, like Gibson, that it was situated in the wrong place. But most importantly, the word Macoraba and Mecca are not the same word in Arabic. They are not even pronounced the same way. They only enjoy the first letter and nothing more. But even the letter doesn't make any sense, not for Macoraba, because it is the place of. She concluded, the plain truth is that the name of Macoraba has nothing to do with that of Mecca, and that the location indicated by Ptolemy for Macoraba in no way dictates identification of the two. Ian de Morris concludes this way, etymologically, Macoraba has many problems. It is telling that after 350 years of experimentation, we have a handful of incompatible etymologies, none of which quite fits. It is also telling that 5 very different interpretations have resorted to languages that flourished outside ancient Mecca. Aramaic from Sprenger, Hebrew from Bokhar and Dozi, Old South Arabian from Glasser and Ali. Why then is there still a consensus that Macoraba is Mecca? The idea was first noted in the 17th century. In the 18th century, it found its way into encyclopedias. In the 19th, it was fairly common knowledge among Orientalists like Conrad and Meredith, who helped to popularize the idea. But it was probably Albert Forbiger's entry in Pauli's encyclopedia that assured its place in the canon of Orientalist thought. It is not impossible that Mecca is Macoraba, but right now, given the state of the field, there is no rigorous way to bridge the two names. It is easier to conclude that they are different places. Patricia Crone seems to be vindicated. Okay, let's go to some conclusions, and we'll try to finish this up by the end of the hour. Conclusions for Mecca. When all is said and done, what do we know? If it did not exist, then neither did Muhammad or the Qur'an, because both are dependent on Mecca. Getting back to your point, we have to have Mecca in order for the next two that we're going to get into to exist. Mecca is foundational for both Muhammad and the Quran, so without it, they both fall. Mecca is important for Muslims because they believe that it is the earliest and most important city in the history of mankind. Yet references to Mecca in the Quran and the tradition do not hold up historically. In other words, that it's near Sodom and Gomorrah, or that Abraham, Ishmael, and Hagar lived there. All right? Secondly, the vegetation and peoples listed there are all 600 to 1,000 miles to the north. What's more, other references suggest that Mecca is filled with lush fruit trees, grass, grain, streams, which make no sense as Mecca has always been in a desert with bad and depleted desert soil. Ironically, though it's claimed to be the greatest city in the history, the Qur'an itself only refers to it once in Surah 48, chapter 48, verse 24, signifying that the authors either did not consider it that important or it only came into existence later on. Geographically speaking, the Qur'an places almost all of its 65 referenced areas 600 miles to 1,000 miles further north than Mecca, suggesting that the authors of the Qur'an came from there and not from down south. Number 3, the Quranic Arabic as well as the supposed prophets are all situated to the north. Even the Arabic words endings used in the Qur'an do not come from Mecca, but from Nabatean Aramaic, which is again situated 600 miles further north. Mecca is where the Muslims contend that between 70 and 300 prophets are buried. Yet with all the buildings now being constructed in Mecca, requiring deep foundations, they have yet to dig up even one. It seems the Saudi Arabians, because of Mecca's lack of history, are cementing up all the evidence, suggesting even they are either skeptical of its history or they do not want the rest of the world to find out. Number 4, no one has ever heard of it, possibly because of where it's situated, off the trade routes. When Dr. Patricia Qur'an asked the surrounding civilization if they had ever heard of the city of Mecca, she went to every one of them, the Himyarites, the Azarites, the Nabateans, she went to the Assyrians, the Romans, the Persians, she went to the Nubians even. She could not find any reference to this Mecca, this place called Mecca, including those empires which are right next door. Yet other much less significant towns close to Mecca, such as Maghrib or Sana or Najran or Taif or Yathrib or Khaybar or Petra or Mamre, are all well known and well documented, yet not one reference to Mecca. When noting the trade route through these towns, we find that they are all located on the western plateau, while Mecca is over 3,000 feet down below it, proving it was not on any trade route. We have no problem seeing where the trade went, the leather goods and the salt. Starting in Aden, going to Sana, going to Najran, coming up to Taif, going up to Yathrib, coming up to Khaybar, then Tabuk, then on up to Petra, and then Gaza. That we can see, and you can see it. They're all on the same plateau. They're all where the water is. They're all where the oasis. These are oases where the water is, and that's why the caravans used it. But all they were selling was leather and salt. Mecca is completely off that plateau. Number 5, up to 741 AD, no historian nor any geographer had referred to this city. Mecca before 741, which is considered the earliest documentary evidence for it anywhere, simply has no history. And even that reference is located in southern Turkey, which is too far north, way up into what we know today as Edessa. When Ptolemy in the 2nd century wrote his book on Arabian geography, he never listed Mecca, so that none of the earliest 15th to 16th century European maps of Arabia have a Mecca listed on them either. Neither the land trade route along the Arabian Western Plateau, nor the Red Sea trade route along the eastern African coast supports an early Mecca, proving that none of the trade went via Mecca at all, confronting the notion that it was the center of trade. And that's what it would have given its importance. And that's why still today, Muslims do not know how to claim or how to say that Mecca was important. Where did it get its importance from? It had to be a trade route, but it's not on the trade route. Number 6, a possible reason it was not known was because it was in a desert, thus without water. Trade needs people, and people need water and food and towns, all of which never existed in Mecca until the mid-8th century, over 100 years after Islam was supposedly created. Despite Muslims' claim for the Zam Zam well that Allah provides its inexhaustible water for over 1 billion believers, it gets all its water from desalination plants built in the USA and in Europe. Because of Mecca's water problem, Queen Zubayda's aqueduct was built in 801, which then had to be refurbished 9 times in the subsequent 974 years due to the overbearing need for potable water, and then finally replaced with desalination plants after 926 AD. While Petra was a possible antecedent for Mecca, it looks like Jerusalem is a better choice. Ptolemy's maps, or rather the Europeans' ones that are taken and trying to position what he was saying in his geography, Those renditions from the 15th and 16th century, they all include Petra, which is interesting. Notice Petra that I circled in red up there. They all include Petra, suggesting that only Petra is really historical. The antecedents for the Meccan pilgrimage make more sense with Jerusalem than they do with Petra, as they are not only earlier, but they use many of the same functions, like we saw with the Kaaba, like we saw with the Marwa and Safa, like we saw with the Zam Zam well. Ian D. Morris and Zaid bin Hayim have really helped us find responses to the claims for Mecca's existence in the 7th century and before by simply looking and understanding the historical record for each of these places and debunking them quite easily by simply looking at a map. Just look at a map and see where they place them, either up in the Gulf of Aqaba or over on the eastern coast of Arabia. Number 8, now we can understand why no mosque had qiblas facing Mecca until the 8th century. Muslims have no idea why all the earliest qiblas were facing Petra. What they try to say is this, and Dr. David, I can't remember his last name, it'll come to me. David, who is there in England, what he said is, well, the reason why all these different qiblas are facing different directions is because they didn't know mathematics very well. And it was only in the 9th and 10th century that mathematics was used, and so therefore the people were just pre-scientific. And being pre-scientific, they didn't know their directions. Now, folks, stop and think who you're talking about. You're talking about Nabatean traders, the only traders that can cross the desert. How do you think they crossed the desert? They didn't know mathematics. They didn't use mathematics. They used the stars. And they were the only people that were able to go and find their own little wells because they owned the wells. And if you didn't find the well, if you were off by 1 degree, you actually you died. To go over thousands of miles across the desert, you need to use the stars. They were way ahead of those who came after, the ones who used mathematics. So that's why all of their temples, their Nabatean temples, which now become mosques today, they're all facing Petra within 1 degree off, even as far away as India. So you cannot say that they were pre-scientific. They were more scientific than even what we can do today. And what they would do is this was fascinating. Whenever they were going to go someplace, they would sing, they would chant. And the chant would have so many stanzas. And they would know that they would have to go towards this star, and they would have to use that stanza 365 times. So they would walk alongside their camels. That's why they didn't go on the camels. The camels carried the goods. That means the camels could carry more goods. And they would stride, and they would sing. As they're singing, they would be counting. So they knew that they had to do this particular piece of poetry 365 times. Once they got there, then they had to turn towards this star and go 656 or whatever it was in that direction. And so they walked singing this new poem that would give them to 630. And they would get there, and then they would look down, and they would pull out the sand, and there is the well. That's how accurate they were. That's why today, look and see who their descendants are. They're still singing those songs. Go to Arabia and notice they're still chanting those chants. But today they don't need to do that. They have roads to follow because the roads were put in after the 9th century. Now they don't go on camels. Now they go on Toyota trucks. We're almost finished, and it's 12 o'clock. We have 1 hour to go. So it seems from all of our research on the period preceding the 7th century, the credibility for Mecca's existence is getting hard to almost impossible to find. Conclusion, certainly someone, somewhere, at some time, should have known about this city, yet no one, anywhere, nor at any time has, proving that it never existed at the time of Muhammad, nor during early Islam.